Hello and welcome to the webinar. Today's program is going to be about Penns Creek. We're fortunate enough to have Rick Nyles with us from Sky Blue Outfitters. I'll do an introduction with Rick here in just a moment. My name is Dave Kyle. I'm the founder of the website PA Fly Fish, and glad you could join us tonight. Really fortunate to have Rick with us. Rick's a friend of mine who I've been fly fishing with for a number of years, and I actually saw Rick do a similar presentation he's going to do tonight. He modifies it from year to year, of course, a few years ago at one of the shows. And I was talking to him a couple months ago and thought it'd be a great time to reintroduce those who are familiar with PA fly fish or other people who haven't seen and learned a lot about Penns Creek just yet, to Rick and to some of the things that he's learned about fly fishing there over the last 35 or 40 years. And I thought it was a really fantastic presentation, and I wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to learn more about it because it is such a great stream. It has its challenges, and I think Rick will cover a lot of that for us. But to those of you who don't know Rick, I'll let him cover a little bit more in detail about himself. But Rick is the founder and owner of Sky Blue Outfitters, and Rick covers guiding services all over the region in Pennsylvania, and a lot of the name streams that you would be familiar with, as well as some other streams and regions around the country and world. Rick, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself and talk about some of the things that you guys are doing and some of the team that you have?
All righty, well, I'll get started here. I'm going to grab the screen.
Sure.
So anyway, this is, I'm going to talk about Penns Creek, the hatch factory. And if you've ever been on Penns and experienced one of the dense hatches, it's a good time to be there. And it can be a frustrating time. Just a little bit about me. You know, Dave said I own Sky Blue Outfitters. I've been fly fishing for over 40 years, guiding for 23 years now. It's been a long time, a real nice journey. I do destination trips in Pennsylvania, Montana. We've been to Idaho, been up to Labrador. I've taken groups to all these different places, Virginia Beach and the Outer Banks and places like that. I just accepted a position of executive VP for Pennsylvania TU, and I'm also on the board at Perkiomen Valley TU. And my team is made up of myself, of course, Taylor Helbig, Dave Allball, you should know him, and Dave Rothrock, Brian Shoemaker on the Susquehanna, Derek Everly, Bill Nolan and Shane Becker. They're up in the Lehigh for me now. So, and one thing I just wanted to point out, I'm really experienced of getting flies out of trees. So it's taken took a lot of years to learn how to do that, but I figured it out.
I can attest to that because he helped me out the other day just do that. But I also want to mention, Rick, that the team was also not just focused solely on trout fishing. You guys also do summer and bass fishing as well.
Yeah, Brian Shoemaker and Bill Nolan, they both work, do drift boats on the Juniata and the Susquehanna. So we have a pretty good team put together, and I'm really proud of them. So I always like to say there's no dumb questions. I just give dumb answers. So, you know, feel free to ask questions. Use the chat. If I don't catch it, Dave, hopefully he'll catch it and he can wave his hand and, you know, I'll stop and we'll address the question that comes up. Or you can wait till the end what questions then. So I just wanted to show this quote I got from somebody, and he's fairly well known. I'm not going to mention his name, but we were corresponding back and forth, and he said in his correspondence, I don't know if I've ever seen so many good hatches overlapping at one time with so many fish all over the place, keying in on different ones. I never went back. He got very frustrated. He didn't catch any fish, and there was fish rising everywhere, and that can be Penns. So we all love a good hatch. I mean, that's what we're looking for, is a hatch like that. You know, and there it is on pens. I got the sunlight right, and you can see all the bugs that are there. And it can be really, really dense. This is Granums and Hendricksons in April. Just look at how many flies are out there. No fish rising, but they were just here and there. None really, not like 20 fish were coming up in front of us, but they were taking a bug here and there. You just got to do it right. You know, one thing, you know, patience is what you got to have at pens. You got to be willing to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering. And that's one of the key words there, without getting angry or upset. But if you're persistent in a course of action, in spite of difficulty and opposition, you can catch some nice fish there. The fish in pens, they're beautiful fish. You know, mostly browns. There's some rainbows around. There are some really big fish in that creek. You just got to find them. So it's a nice creek to go find some big fish. And I'm just going to show you a couple pictures here. And, you know, you can catch some native brook trout in pens, and every once in a while you can find a real nice one. Here's a lady client I had, and we were fishing into the darkness, and she picked up this real nice brookie. So it's the biggest one we ever got in there. So let's talk about the creek first. It's big, it's wide, it can be deep in some sections, and of course we all know it's not the easiest place to wade. There are some deep runs, nice green water. There are some really long, deep pools. This is one you couldn't walk across or wade across. It's very popular pool. Then there's some nice long riffles. Dave Albaugh would love that, swinging his wet flies through there. But you can nymph through there and look for rising fish. And then you do have some pocket water, kind of more in the springtime. It'll disappear as the year goes on and the water flows get lower. So it's tough to find good pocket water like that. You know, the water's up there. That's probably in April. And there's some major creeks that feed Penn. Elk Creek, Pine Creek, Poe, Muddy Run, Swift Run, Cherry Run, and Weichert. There's the ones I wanted to point out. They have brook trout in them and some browns. And those not familiar with Penns, it actually starts in a cave, okay? Flows its way down to Coburn, down to Poe Patty, down to Weichert, and on into the Susquehanna. So it starts out up here. Penns Creek comes in here. This is Sinking Creek. It's regulated water. Then it joins up. Sinking Creek joins up with Penns, flows down to Coburn. And then you can see it goes from Coburn. This is Elk and Pine coming in here. And then it flows down through Ingleby. If you've ever been to Ingleby, there's limited parking there. It just really seems there's limited parking on Penns.
Hey, Rick, we lost you there a little bit. I think you were saying that we had some limited parking going on through most of Penns Creek. You froze up on us there. I'm gonna get him back in there and type him a message. Everybody else can see me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just our presenter. Thank you, guys. Looks like he jumped out, so I'll do a little dancing here for us. So he'll come back here in a moment, I'm sure. I think what he's going to share with us, and I'll bring him back in, is that the map that he was showing there, and my 2 cents on Penns, is that when you're up in Penns, you really almost want to plan your day out, because to even some cases get from one point to another point, you may have to drive or walk long distances there's often very good paths around there, but some of the parking is very, very limited. You have to really plan out where you're going to be. It's not unlike some longer streams some stretches of streams where you can go from point to point to point and just drive all the way along the stream. That's not the case for Penns Creek at all. It's far from it, as a matter of fact. You almost have sections or areas that are really you can't get to unless you're coming from one direction or the other. And so you really need to plan out where you're going to park, where you're going to go, and what you think you're going to do that day. You can get to long stretches. I've been in some spots in there where I've literally done like about a 7-mile hike, park at one lower section and go all the way up. And I think the other thing I want to suggest, but I'm not going to take too much from what Rick's going to talk about, is that you really want to spend your time planning, but taking section to section when you're going fishing in Penns. And oftentimes what you're going to encounter too is be prepared that in certain times of the season, especially in springtime, let's say May, when some of the more prolific hatches are coming off, let's just say even green drakes, you're going to have to hunker into even a section of water and know that's a spot of water you want to be for that evening. And you may not even move around too much. It's like it can get pretty busy depending on the time of the year and what you're doing, especially of course, May on a weekend in Penns Creek, it can get pretty crowded in certain locations. Let's put it that way.
Catch and release is from below Pope Hattie, runs through where Cherry Run is. And then what they did, here's a picture of some of the water. I just really enjoy the water down there. There's just so much water and holding areas for the trout. As you can see, it's wide, and to fish it correctly, you're going to have to cross it a couple times because you are down in that gorge. I like to walk all the way up the trail pretty far and spend the whole day getting back down to the parking area. So they did extend the catch and release area over 3 miles, and it's artificial lure, just like the rest of it. And it's mostly walk-in access. Okay, so the new catch and release areas from where it's stopped here below Cherry Run, and then they added about 3 miles. I think it's 2.7 or something like that. So it's nice they did that. Again, you're going to have to park out on the road and walk in a lot of sections. Again, parking is limited down there, but there's spots to be found. There's just gorgeous fish throughout the whole system, and there's some nice fish. So let's just talk rods and reels and tippet. Now, I like to use a 4-weight, maybe a 5. Generally, I just use a 4-weight. I like to go on the light side, fast action rod. It's more or less a 5-weight is how I look at it. And then as far as leaders go, 7.5 foot to 9. I'm a short leader guy. I think short leaders, you have more accuracy in your casting. Your drifting, you might have to do some better mending than you have to do with 9 foot, but I just think a short leader is nice. And one of the other reasons is that generally everybody has weighted forward lines these days. So if you say you want a short cast, well, you want to be able to have some more fly line out past your rod tip, so the rod loads for you back and forth. So, and then tippet 3x to 5x. I used to use 6x a lot, and I stopped. And the reason I stopped is when you hit one of the big boys, they have a tendency to break 6x. So I usually don't go any smaller than 5x. And I'll tell a story later that I don't think the knot really matters. So again, shorter leaders give you better control, loading of the rod. And what I do is I buy mono leaders and maybe even trim a 7.5 foot back to 6 and maybe put 2 feet on or 1.5 feet of fluorocarbon. I don't like a full fluorocarbon leader. People say it stretches. So I just use fluorocarbon tippet when I'm building up nymph rigs or if I'm extending a dry fly rig. So let's talk the hatches again. Now, there's little black stoneflies, granums, Hendricksons, caddis, quill gordons, kea. I mean, you can go down that whole list. If it hatches in Pennsylvania, most likely it is on Penns. Here's a black quill for an example. That's not popular in all the other streams. I came across this fly and I wasn't sure what it was. So I asked somebody, what did they think it was? And I think it was Henry Ramsey. And he said, that's definitely a black quill. So first time I took this picture, I just wasn't sure. So this beginning of the year and over the winter, February and stuff, you'll see little black stoneflies and they'll start coming off. And you look on the trees and on the snow, you'll see them on the snow. If you see them on the snow, start fishing, stonefly nymphs, little black stonefly nymphs, and you might even be lucky enough to find some fish slapping on some as they skate across the water to get to the banks or logs. And then you have the granums, of course, and that's a real heavy hatch there. It's a pretty heavy hatch anywhere in State College area down on the J and Penn. And here's a granum, and I've seen them heavier than this, but there they are flying up Penn's Creek. So then you have the Hendricksons and red quills coming off. That's one of my favorite hatches. There's not many people out there. It starts around the second week of April, lasts till the end of April, maybe about 2 weeks. It's the type of hatch I like because it's an afternoon hatch. You can go there at 11 o'clock and start nymphing. And then when you start seeing the duns come off, hopefully you get some rising fish, and you will. You can find rising fish. It's the first big mayfly hatch, and they're ready to eat. So here's a Hendrickson after the second metamorphosis into a spinner. I was lucky enough to get the shell from when it molted in the tree into a spinner. And I was looking for this for years. So I finally got a nice picture of one, and that's what they leave behind up in the trees when they molt into a spinner. And there's another picture of one. Of course, caddis, tan and green. This past fall, we were using green caddis and we were catching fish on top using a green caddis. So, and I'm talking October, early October. It wasn't the apple caddis. There was green caddis coming off and they were willing to eat. We didn't get the big fish to come up because the creek was so low, but we caught a handful of little fish. Little fish 9 to 12, 13 inches. So, and then, there's a lot of caddis in the stream. And I think that hatch is going to be hurting for a little bit. If you were in pens in October, like I was, you saw empty cases and cases with caddis in them exposed in the rocks. So I think there was probably a heavy caddis kill because the water was so low. You could see the cases all over the dry rocks. So the caddis hatch next year might be a little weak. So the nymphs, the mayfly nymphs, they can crawl around and find water. The key is that they keep their eye out for all forms of the caddis and the mayflies. The nymphs, the emergers, the duns, and the spinners. So, they're looking for that stuff. Now here's a March brown. That's another great hatch. It's one of my favorite hatches in May. Again, it's a big mayfly. The nice thing about that, you get a little bit of a cloudy day, even a sunny day with a good cloud cover that's moving through all the time, and it gets shade on the water for about 5-10 minutes. The March browns will come off all day long. They'll sit there and just come up. You just got to hunt heads, be patient, stake out an area and just say, hey, I think there's going to be some coming up here. Hang out for a half hour, 40 minutes. Hey, you don't see anything? Go back to nymphing. Go to a different section. This is a gray fox, and that's part of the March brown family. I guess there's some conversation on that. Some people say it is, and some people say it isn't. So now here's a spinner, and there's an egg. That's what's being laid, okay? And if you look close enough, you can just see little small shiny dots in there. That is nymphs. Every little dot there you see is small nymph eggs that are going to hatch. So it's not like one nymph is coming out of here. So, and then the spinners, will they fall? We've all been there. If you fish pens and you fished it into the evening, you sit there and you look up and say, oh my word, look at all these spinners. And then you get frustrated because they don't come down. They go back into the trees. So here's some spinners. You know, it's interesting, this picture here. I know I was always concerned in the past that on my rusty spinner, say, I wanted to keep my wings perpendicular to the body. And then I got this picture and I don't care anymore. I just throw it out there. I don't care if the wings are pointing back, because that's generally how they're going to point from being cast out there. So I just don't get concerned about that anymore. And then you have sulfurs, of course. That's a great hatch. Another good hatch. That brings up a lot of fish. One technique I learned on pens, I will drop a sulfur nymph 3 or 4 inches below my dry. And I've caught a lot of fish that way. You don't, if there's sulfurs on the water and not coming up, just pay attention and see if one is flashing, you know, below the surface. So you might want to extend it 6 or 8 or 10 inches. So here's a blue wing olive, and the hatch can be really heavy. You know, I call this the olive massacre. These were just piled up and in the back eddies. They were just all over the place. And you can catch some nice fish. All these fish you're seeing here are Penn's fish. And then you have green drake time. Let's get the word out. The green drake is coming off. It's a party. Let's go do it. Hey, there's the traffic jam in Wykert, and there's, I don't know, Johnson's Pool down at Cherry Run. That's how it gets. If you want to fish the drakes there, I would suggest you go there at 3 o'clock and stake a claim and wait, whatever, 6 hours for an hour worth of fishing, if you like that. When I die, this is what my tombstone's going to say. I hate the drakes, only because of the crowds. You know there's other streams out there in central PA that have the drakes. You don't have to just go to Penn's. So, but here's some photos of some green drakes. Here's the coffin fly. And here's a big green drake here, the coffin fly there. And here I got a picture too of a coffin fly, and that's its molt, outer shell from the molt. Again, some nice fish. Then you have stoneflies. I like the stonefly hatch there. It's very sporadic. If you ever hit the stoneflies where they literally are coming off like mayflies, you're going to have fun for about a half an hour, 40 minutes, because it's not like they come off real heavy all day. They'll come off heavy for a half hour, 45 minutes in that range. Then it just shuts down. But the fishing, if you ever lucky enough to be on the creek when they come off, it's really a fun time. And there's different colors, stoneflies. Golden stones in the pens seem to be the main food. When I'm fishing stoneflies there, I'm using golden stones. So now here's an interesting story. It was midday and we were fishing, tailed off. We had caddis in the morning. We caught some fish. And this gentleman here was him and his son. And we were working our way down the creek. And I said, okay, let's just search with a big stonefly. And I said to him, big flies, big fish. Well, as you can see, he got his big fish. And it was 23 inches. We measured it out, and that's what it was. And all we were doing midday, there was no activity. We just I had a thingamabobber on with a stonefly nymph, and we were hitting riffles, as you can see, and just searching for fish. So he caught another one. It was about 14 or 15 inches, and then it really died off until the evening. What you want to do when you think you should be fishing stoneflies is look at the rocks, see what's on the rocks. Some stoneflies are nocturnal. They'll hatch in the evening. The fish get on them, and then they'll still look up in the morning. So don't be hesitant to put a stonefly pattern on in the morning and just search for fish. One of the things I like to do with stoneflies, if I go to Penn's and I'm going to fish it that evening, I might get there at 3, 4 o'clock and we got high sun, no clouds, bright sunlight. I will put on a stonefly dry or like a stimulator. I tie my own, so it's not a stimulator, but I throw it out there and just skitter it around. I enjoy doing that. I'm just killing time. I'm just searching around, and you never know. You get a couple big fish will come up on it, and you'll get some small ones too, but all you're doing is getting their attention. It's like fishing hoppers, out in Montana or someplace like that. You want to look in the grass, check out what color's coming off. Generally you have orange, yellow, grayish, black. You want to look at the underside, see what color you have there, so you know what to use, what's hatching and what's coming off. Then in the fall, you have the Isonychia. That's a big mayfly. And I got to be honest with you, this past year, I was out there the whole month of October guiding and fishing, and I probably saw 5 Isonychias in the whole month. I don't know what's going on. It was the same way the year before. I don't know if I just didn't encounter them where they were hatching, like the green drake moves up through Penn's, but not seeing many Isonychias at all. And even the apple caddis, we didn't see much. The fall caddis, I didn't see many of them either. We had a lot of blue wing olives and we had a lot of green caddis, but we did not see the regular hatches. Now, one thing I did when one day I was fishing with Mr. Rothrock on the creek was that I put on like a small, I think it was a size 12 stimulator, yellow, orange, I forget what color. And I just searched with that. And where I searched was around every dry rock that was sticking up. And I would just scrape the edges of the rock with it. And I did pretty good. I was having fish, nothing big, just seemed all the small fish were coming up. Dave did get a couple nice ones. He was drop shotting, so he picked some up nymphing, but I like to dry fly fish, so I just did that. So, and then one other thing, when in doubt, use the mighty ant. If you encounter a fish eating in the fall and you can't figure it out, put an ant on. Just throw it out there, drift it over him. If he's eating ants, he's going to eat it the first or second cast, first good presentation that you do. He will eat that ant. And believe me, I've experienced it.
Hey, Rick, can jump in a couple of questions here for you?
Yeah.
So, going back into June, what do you see? You move from the primary hatches that happen in the springtime into the fall. What about June, summertime, things like that? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, you have stoneflies, of course, throughout the whole summer. And then there's a small caddis that comes off. It's a cream colored, about a size 18. You can find that through the summer. If the water conditions are right and it's okay to fish, temperatures are good, you'll see a smaller cream colored. You have blue wing olives in the June and throughout the summer during those cloudy, rainy days. And as far as sulfurs, they kind of tail off towards the end of June, but they'll keep coming off, but it'll be very, how should I say, sporadic. Certain areas, if the water temperature's right, say where a feeder creek comes in, you can still find sulfur fishing there. They like a certain temperature, just like any other mayfly. You always think about what they call the second sulfur hatch up on the west branch of the Delaware. It's because of the cold releases, and it's keeping that water at a consistent temperature. So the sulfurs come off, the whole time up there. And it's sort of the same way at Penn's, but you just got to find where they're coming off. And you'll find caddis. And, don't be afraid to throw some hoppers there. There's a lot of grass along Penn's. You don't see many hoppers, but they're looking for big morsels, big fish, big flies. When you're out in Montana, you don't go searching with an 18 blue wing olive. you're searching with a hopper or something like that. And one of the things I see a lot, and I see people do this all the time, and Dave, you and I talked about that because where we were fishing, I said, I would never walk by that water in my home stream. But people I watch walk by productive water all the time. You know, you think about your home stream and where fish hold there. The fish are holding there in pens also. You don't have to go to the deep holes where you can't see the bottom. You know, you just fish everywhere, and especially the banks.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on this one because we were talking about this the other day, and I on my screen our startup screen to the program, I have this beautiful, 18-inch brown trout that falls into this message that you're sharing, where we were going from point to point, and I just figured, I'm walking down the stream, I'll just cast down below me. I literally was casting down below me as I'm walking down the stream, and there was a nice rock there, and I was probably I wasn't in knee deep water. I was going looking for bigger holes. It was probably 18 inches of water at most, and there was this rock there, and I cast out behind it, and lo and behold, boom, there's this beautiful 18-inch brown trout. To your point, Rick, it's exactly that. And it's true for, I think what you said the other day when we were fishing is true for any stream, but but Penn's is particularly true because there's lots of places that you would walk past and not even think anything of it, but then lo and behold, there's all kinds of great opportunity in these locations that you would just walk past.
Yeah, there's I don't know if I mentioned it to you, there's this one spot, it's only 20 foot long, and it's right against the bank, and the trail's 2 feet off the bank. And I go out to the middle to fish that, and everybody else is up on the trail walking right by it.
Yeah.
And I've caught many nice fish out of there.
Biggest
I know it's an undercut bank, it's a trough, it's not long, but it holds 3 or 4 nice fish in there.
The biggest fish I ever caught on Penn's was 18 inches off the bank. It was a 22-inch in a green drake situation. So yeah, I was casting all the way across the water, but it was kind of fun. A couple more questions. ISOs, is there any other types of hatches in June, things like that, mayfly hatches that you think of?
I mean, there's slate drakes and yellow drakes. I mean, they're very sporadic. They're not heavy, but they're there. Again, if you're lucky enough to encounter them. I mean, I know, I said my tombstone's going to say, hate the drakes. Believe me, I've been out there. I like fishing for them. I go up to the Delaware to try and hit them up there. But, the drakes, you could have a report, hey, they're in Weicker. So everybody goes to Weicker. Guess what? They moved up. They're at Pope Addy now. So they might be a mile long, but they're going up the creek, as the temperature changes or it's more consistent. You think about when I start seeing the red buds of the leaves start coming out, that tells me the ground is getting to a good temperature. This is in the spring, like early April. I start seeing the red buds. First thing I think of is Hendrickson's red quills. Because what's going on is that the ground's getting to a certain temperature, which is the tree starts taking on water to push the leaves out. And so I think the same thing, that the bottom of the creek is getting around to the same temperature. And so that gets the nymphs active. 54 to 58 in April is really good temperature to be fishing. So 54 starts the nymphs going, they'll start hatching at 56 or 58. And April, I don't mind fishing in high sun, no clouds. It's warming up that bottom. It's getting the nymphs active. Now, once you get into May, you're going to go, I don't want high sun, no clouds, right? You want to start having clouds, same with June. Then in the fall, like late October, I don't mind high sun, no clouds. Again, it's warming up the water. So you have a question?
Another question. Well, it kind of ties back to an earlier part of the presentation, but what percentage of pens are wild versus stock trout?
Oh, well, They do stock up above Coburn. Some rainbows do work their way down, in that stretch. You might catch them there. I mean, I haven't caught a stocked fish down in catch and release, and geez, I have no idea.
I think they're still stocking the Union County
Yeah,
Club still stocks there above Millmont.
yeah, they're stocking outside of catch and release down to Millmont. Yeah, so the state is stocking and they're stocking.
Yeah,
And some fish could work their way up. When they were
Mhm.
stocking up closer to Cherry Run, we've caught some rainbows here and there. That tells me they were stocked. But I would say 99% of the fish I catch are wild.
Yeah.
I can't think of a stocked fish I caught there in years.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
you get down below Millmont, and you're certainly going
Mhm.
to encounter a lot more stocked fish.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's a little, I don't know, exercise here. It's a teaching moment. I just thought I'd throw this in here. I show it in my full service one. I'm going to show you a video here. You tell me what you see. Well, I'm going to ask you questions. All right. There's a fish working. So first thing you want to ask yourself, let's think about this. Did the fish turn and take the fly downstream? Is that why we had that type of splash? Was it a caddis tank? It was splashy. Was it a big fish or a small fish? Did he eat a dun or an emerger? I'll answer these for you. No, he didn't take it downstream. No, it wasn't a caddis. Was it a big or small fish? It was a big fish. And what did he eat? An emerger. Now, one thing you want to do is study what the fish is doing and recognizing what he's doing. So let's look at this again. What you're seeing is dorsal tail. That tells me it's a big fish. And he's taking an emerger. His head did not come out. But what you saw was a dorsal and then his tail splash to go back down to the basement, get back down on the bottom. So that told me he was a big fish. All right. And there he is. That is the fish. I caught him. So it was a nice 21 inch, maybe even 22, nice big fat head. So know what your rises are. And here, when you see a big fish, this is big fish now. If you see the dorsal tail like we just saw in the video, that's telling me he's eating an emerger or something like that. So if I have a dry fly on, I'm going to drop a nymph down here, match the hatch, maybe 6-10 inches. I usually go long and try it because that way I can keep shortening it up and get it closer and closer to that dry fly. If you start short and you want to go deeper, now you got to add tippet, cut it off, retie it all. Where this, you would just nip off the nymph, trim off two inches and retie it on. Now, if you see a head in dorsal, and you'll see the dorsal easier than you will see the head, that tells me he's taking a dun, okay? If I just see the dorsal come up, and if you study the rises of what's going on, be patient, learn to study rises, watch the fish. You might have several fish out there. Just keep your eye on them, see what they're doing and understand what they're doing. So anyway, big, beautiful fish can be found down there. I mean, they're all over the place. I mean, look at some of these fish. They're just absolutely gorgeous. Can't complain about them. Now, here's a story for you. And this is what I mentioned earlier in the presentation. It was about the knot in the eye on the fly. Well, I was nymphing, and it was April. It was Hendrickson time. I get to fish before guiding in April. Early April, I get to squeeze in some days. So anyway, I'm on pens, and I'm fishing nymphs, and I knew this fish was hanging out where he was. And he was there the year before, and he just wanted show himself. I saw him feed, but he was difficult to get at with a cast. He was against a log, under a log, and he just, it was really tough to get into him. So anyway, I was working my way back downstream, and I saw him. I saw head and I saw dorsal, and it was Hendrickson's were on the water. I caught a couple on dries, and I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna take my nymphs off, get in position. And when I cut my nymphs off, I was probably at 2x or something. I had to trim my leader on a 45-degree angle so I could lead it through the eye. And I had this big, ugly knot. And what I found with big fish, they come up, and then when they go down and stop rising, they just stop. So I wanted to get there and get a fly on him as quick as possible, and I did. So this is the biggest brown I ever caught on pens. It measured over 24 inches. Actually, it measured, what I can tell, over 24 and a half. I will not say it was 25. Now, maybe this video is not doing its justice, but that photograph does it justice. As you can see, it almost doesn't fit in my net. So I measured him on my rod, put a nick in my rod so I could measure him. And I also measured the net when I got home. So that tells me, he was a big fish. So anyway, please catch and release. Support TU. I'm a big supporter of TU. And thank you very much.
Cool. If you guys have any more questions, let's put them in the chat. One of the ones I had for you, Rick, was one of the more frustrating and challenging situations on Penns Creek, and you kind of talked about this early on, is there can be situations where you have multiple hatches coming off. I mean, it can be just, green drake is most notable for this. You could literally have 5+ hatches happening at the same time in an evening. And what should someone be doing in a situation like that?
I learned a lesson. And this goes way back 20 years ago. I was floating with Lee Hartman up on the Delaware. Well, we were floating into the evening. We're going to hit the green drake hatch, and we did. But when we were floating, when we started out, we had fish working, and we were throwing caddis on them. That's what was coming off. And we were catching fish. We caught a fish here, fish there. We had a good time on the Delaware. 20 years ago, it was really picky. It's not that bad anymore. But anyway, then the sulfurs came off. So we switched to sulfurs. We didn't get anything. Then the drakes came off. We put drakes on. We couldn't get a fish to eat our fly. I put a caddis back on. I caught fish. And that taught me a lesson. That taught me that the first hatch coming off, they keyed in on, and they didn't care about any other hatch. Okay. Now, sometimes what I do is if I have multiple hatches going on, and I'll just say drakes and sulfurs, I will tie on a green drake, and I will, off the bend of the hook, I will tie on a sulfur 4 to 6 inches away. So I'm covering both hatches that are going on out there, or I'll put on a sulfur emerger, spit on it so it just sinks a little bit, and see if they're eating that. And you just watch your green drake to see if it goes down, gets tugged along the top or something like that. So, I mean, just, experiment, find out what to do,
So in that same area of talking about multiple flies on a line, Kevin asked, do you recommend dry droppers or Euro on pens? Which scenarios would you select for setup?
I'm not a big Euro fan, and that's just me. I kind of Euro nymphed back in the 80s. Didn't know it, but I did. The problem with Euro nymphing on pens is that you're going to limit where you can fish, especially in the fall. Fall Euro nymphing is going to be really tough on pens because the water's down, it's crystal clear. I like to stay away from the fish. I like to cast farther instead of moving closer. So do I Euro nymph? Yes. Okay. Do I drop shot? Yes. I try to do everything based on what I want to do and what the clients want to do. But one thing I do, I call it long arm nymphing. I'll put two nymphs on a bobber and I'll cast it like a dry fly. That the bobber is like a dry fly, thingamabobber. And I'll be hitting nooks and crannies that nobody else is hitting with nymphs. You know, you can't get to them because the water's too deep or something like that. It's nothing for me to cast 60 feet of two nymphs and some form of strike indicator to the far bank that's, you know, cliff-like. So I do a lot of that. I call it long arm nymphing. I don't know if there's a name for it or not. That's what I named it. It works for me. Again, I'm fishing places that nobody else is. So.
Yeah, and I think just to add in here, you have a whole cadre of really great anglers and guides on your staff that I know very well, and actually each one of them fishes differently.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
okay, so Dave Rothrock's going to do one thing with the dropper, okay, and you know somebody else is going to want to do wet flies, and you might want to do something different. So a little bit, you know, everyone's going to have their own favorite. So to answer some of the questions in here for everybody, I don't know if there is a right or wrong answer on how you do all these. Okay.
Yeah.
I think really a lot of it's, if I can offer my own 2 cents, is your own technique you develop over time that you like. But I will suggest that, you know, working with a guide, someone like Rick or other members of his team, you're going to learn some new techniques that maybe you couldn't adapt or learn for yourself with having some help from someone like a guide who's more astute at what they're doing with something like that, and learning some of those techniques and what's happening with some of that too.
Yeah. Well, like if somebody wants the Euro nymph, I'm going to get Taylor, you know, or Derek.
Yeah.
Dave Rothrock likes dry fly fishing and drop shotting.
Right.
You know, Dave Allball, boy, I can't move him an inch off of wet flies. You know, there could be 20 fish rising out there.
I fished with him one day, and I caught 40 fish dry fly fishing, and he would refuse to dry fly.
No, he's old school. He doesn't even have a cell phone. You know, so but he's great at it.
He is.
I'll tell you what, I'm doing more and more of it. I keep rigs in my chest pack. I'm doing more and more dry wet fly fishing than I ever did. You know, he's converted me. It's not that I never did it, but he has such a good technique, the way he sets up his leaders, you know, that's, you know, I'm the dry fly guy. I'm glad of the team I have together. We all have different skill sets.
Absolutely. It's really fun being out with each one of them, because each one of them has their own expertise, specialty, and experiences that lend themselves to the situation that you're in. That, you know, you're going to undoubtedly learn something different from each one of the guides you have there. And I don't mean just Professor Rick and his team, but I've been out with almost everybody there, and it really is a lot of fun to go out with these guys that I've known for many, many years. And still, I've been fly fishing for 40 years and learned something. And I was out with Rick just a couple of days ago, and again, we were talking about some techniques and things, and it's going, oh, I didn't think of it that way. That's a great idea. So I appreciate that. Another question I want to ask, because Jeremy asked this, is kind of going backwards a little bit. Is fishing on Penns mostly public land, or is there a cooperative agreement with the private landowners?
There's, you know, down the extended catch and release. I don't think that's with the landowners down there. Basically from Cherry Run, the old catch and release stretch before they extended it, you know, up through Poe Patty and up through Ingleby. And, you know, that's, I think the far side's all state forest up in that area. And there seems to be a little bit of that, you know, here and there, but the only posted stretch I really know is right above above the Coburn parking lot at the bend there. There's posted signs there, but then you go down to the creek and fish the water that doesn't have the posted signs, and you don't see any really on the creek side. So I don't know what's going on there. I stay out of it. I don't need any controversy. So, but that's a nice stretch to fish there. The other thing is, you know, they put in notch. You can harvest up at Coburn area, and it's notch, you know, 7 to 11 or 12 inches. I forget what it is. And the purpose was, let's see if we can get bigger fish. And it's working. we've been catching bigger fish up there over the past couple of years since they put that program in place. And you're not catching a lot of little, you're catching little ones, but you're catching big ones too. So if they are harvesting, it's not that bad. And I don't know, I never saw anybody carry a fish out of pens. So, catch and release is release, but up at Coburn, all the years I fished up there, I never saw anybody take a stringer out. So
Cool.
let's see.
I think there's one more just came up. Oh, I missed a couple here. Good water levels for wading. What do you think they are?
300 and less if you go by the gauge. It all depends where you want to go, and that's catch and release. I always base it there, so that's where I do most of my fishing and guiding. Because you got to cross the creek at a couple spots if you're really going to fish it right. So I always say about 300 or less. And
yeah.
if you're lucky enough to get there when a thunderstorm comes through and the water starts rising and getting off color, boy, oh boy, put a streamer on, start fishing it. Don't give up on it. You'll get big fish. They love it when the water's rising.
So in water rising, you're suggesting that's the time to put the streamer on?
Yes.
Okay. And hang out and don't leave.
Yeah.
Stay there, don't leave. It starts raining. Okay.
Yeah. Brian asked about soft tackles. Yeah, they're great. I mean, I had a client, that's all he wanted to fish, and he was catching fish, and he was fishing soft tackles. So, and then Jeremy, good point on shallow water. Okay.
Yeah, the thing I would suggest for everybody who hasn't fished it yet or who has fished it a few times, if you're over 25 years old, make sure you have a waiting staff.
Yeah.
that was actually one thing I learned at, like, I think it was about 40 years old. I was like, you know what? It's probably time for me to get a waiting staff out here. So it's good to have a waiting staff out there for yourself. And even I've gone so far as you can buy for like $16-20 those I don't know what you'd call them. They're pretty easy to get on Amazon. There's like basic pull on ice clamp-ons kind of thing like that. They're like chains you can put on the bottom of your shoes. And I had somebody on the website share with me that idea, and I got them for this last year, and it's been awesome. So between the waiting staff and those pull-on $15-20 ice pull chains that you can put on your boots, things have gotten a lot better for me. But that's a pretty tough stream to walk across, let's put it that way.
Yeah, I used to not take a waiting staff, and when I turned 60, I started taking
60. Oh my gosh.
I
gave up 20 years ago.
I've done a lot of wading, so
yeah,
I know how to fall when I'm in the water. So
we talked about that the other day. I'm pretty good. I can throw my fish, my rod, and my phone all in at the same time. It's pretty good.
Yeah, up on the bank. I fell on pens. Oh, what was it? The year before COVID, year before BC, and it wasn't in the creek. I was just walking a trail, and I hit some mud and went down a 2.5 foot embankment, slid under a tree, and hurt my knee pretty good. So you want to be careful all the time. And I've had clients come out there in trips, and they say, "Hey, we want to fish pens," and I say, "I'm sorry, you can't handle it." I just, I look at them physically and just say, "I can't take you there. There's no way you can do it." Because there's only like one or two, to me, easy spots to go to. Most of the spots, you're walking down an embankment, then down the creek embankment, and then the wading's tough. To me, I used felt and spikes. That's what I use. So that seems to work the best for me. The felt's a little tricky around mud. I really take it easy. That's how I fell before. So, felt and studs in it, that seems to work for me.
Two more questions and we'll wrap it up. How much do you see the bigger fish migrating throughout the stream?
Oh, I think they move around, but I think some set up shop here and there. That big one I caught, like I said, I spotted him and he was still there a year later. So, did he go off and spawn and come back? I don't know. But yeah, I'm sure they migrate. I don't know if I joked with you. No, it was in my presentation yesterday. I just said, I always wanted to get a punch and punch the tail or the dorsal on a brown and see if I catch him again and where. So,
My two cents
do
on
they
that one is,
migrate? Hey, up on the Delaware system, they migrate, but then they have a water change. I mean, in temperature, so they'll push up into the West Branch or East Branch if it's cold enough. And they will stay in the main stem, but not all the way down to Callicoon. They'll move up maybe to Lordsville and then go back down to Callicoon. They did a study and they were moving 10 miles up there. So
yeah, Bill Anderson on Little J, that they did studies there, the same thing. They had trout moving. He said, this is a previous presentation, 10 miles.
yeah.
I mean, that's remarkable to me.
Yeah.
Remarkable.
And let's see, have you found whirling disease or diddy bow in pens? No, not that I'm aware of. I make sure my boots are clean. I was just out in Idaho. I couldn't take felt out there or inside the park at Yellowstone. So I didn't take my felts out there. I just took treaded with and put spikes in if I was going to wade. And then let's see, in May, what size March brown dry are you fishing? Well, 14, sometimes 12. Um, it depends on, I tie both. Sometimes I just want to show them a bigger fly. So I'll carry 12s and 14s. And to give you what I do, let me scoot back here. What I do is I tie just Hendricksons and then I carry these and make them March Browns. Okay. So I don't sit here and really tie March Browns. I tie a whole bunch of Hendricksons. And then when I want a March Brown or a gray fox, I use a magic marker. That's an old thing I've been doing for many, many years. So
I think we're gonna wrap it up here on to an hour. I know we usually try to. Let's. I want to give you one more slide. So, Rick, do you want to share with everybody just anything more that we can know about what you're doing and where we can find you?
Well, I mean, it's skyblueoutfitters.com, or you can Google my name, Rick Nyles. I'll come up. And then, of course, my email address, Rick at Sky Blue Outfitters. One thing I do is I started, since I retired, I'm doing this full time. I'm starting to do 2 out west trips and then something exotic. This past year, I did the Squallas. I took a group out for the Squallas in March, something different. We had the rivers to ourselves and we had great fishing. You can see pictures on the website. Then we went to Labrador, I took a group up there, and then we went back out and we were on the Henry's Fork. I was actually there for 2 weeks. I had so much interest in the trip that the first group came in, they flew out Saturday morning. I stayed at the airport. The second group came in Saturday afternoon, and we spent another week. And we did a little tourist type stuff. We went over to West Yellowstone and had dinner and stuff like that. But this coming year, we're going to be on Rock Creek in June.
Where's Rock Creek at?
What's that?
Where's Rock Creek for those who don't know it?
Oh, Montana.
Okay.
So it's supposed to have the highest population of trout in Montana. We're lodging on Rock Creek. You get 2 days of drifting on Rock Creek. It's a pretty unique trip because you need special permits to be on the creek. You can't drift it after July 1st and things like that. And then the days you're not drifting there, we're going to go to the Blackfoot, Bitterroot, Clark Fork, maybe Georgetown Lake. It all depends. And then the fall trip, Dave's booked on that. We're going up to the Missouri for 3 days and then back down to Missoula and Clark Fork, Bitterroot, Blackfoot, whatever. We also started doing some pike fishing out in Montana. So if you want to go pike fishing, we arrange that with the one guy. He's really into it. One guide is really into it, and he took he took two of us out there last year, and we went pike fishing. Two of us went to this lake and pike fish. We caught 25 pike, 26 pike. It was a couple dozen. We each caught around a dozen each. We had a ball. We didn't get anything huge, but they were all around 28 to 32 inches. And the guide would stand on his cooler and he'd tell us when one was chasing our fly. And the client that was on the boat with me loved it because the guide was yelling at me and he said, "You're usually yelling at everybody else. I'm glad to see you're getting yelled at." So and then in October, we're going to Baja, Mexico for rooster fish and mahi-mahi on the fly rod. And the nice thing there is that we have the resort to ourselves and you don't have to get any gear. They supply all the gear, flies, and all that in the package. So that's really nice. You don't have to run out and get a 10 weight and, a reel and all that stuff. So, and then of course I do those package trips in Central PA. So you can go to the website, you can see most of them. There's some trips I have that aren't on the website in Central PA, so you'd have to ask me about them.
What I encourage everyone to do though is go to Rick's website and there's a spot where you can sign up for his newsletter. And every week he puts out a really nice newsletter about what's going on, and he also tell you if something's not going on too. So it's pretty open,
pretty honest.
Pretty honest about what's going on. So I do enjoy your newsletter every week, and so there's always some good information and tips and about what's happening and opportunities for yourself to get involved with the team that he has, as well as some other things that are going on in the region about what's happening for the hatches and fly fishing and things like that.
Yeah, and stuff like the shows and information on that and presentations at different chapters. I try to, incorporate them in there. So it might be a chapter close to you and you can go see a presentation, that Dave Albaugh is doing or some other guide or something like that. So I try to make it informative. I have a little blah 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 section. I just talk about stuff in there, and I try. Many people say I like your honesty. The fishing's not good, it's not good. I don't think you get that with a lot of places. The fishing's always good, no, but you hear that from other, sources. So.
Well, again, thank you very much, Rick. I'm just going to one last moment share with who I am, what's going on. Many of you may not realize I'm Dave Kyle with PA Fly Fish. We're probably the oldest and one of the largest established regional online fly fishing communities here on the East Coast. It's a combination of blog, forum, as well as events like we have here online. Thousands of people there collaborating, sharing, communicating about fly fishing. You can find it at www.paflyfish.com. Any questions or ideas or comments for me, I'm pretty easy to find at dave@paflyfish.com. So, Rick, I want to thank you very much for your time this evening. As always, enjoyed hearing from you and your tips and ideas, and really appreciate everyone else for joining us. And as some people have a question as well, hopefully we're recording this. We'll share this back out for everyone. So again, thank you very much. Everyone have a great evening. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.